Hey there, welcome to Pepper Geek. In this video, I'll talk all about pepper leaves turning yellow. Now, first off, if you're seeing yellow leaves on your pepper plants, don't panic. It's a very common issue. In fact, yellowing leaves are so common that there's a botanical name for it. It's known as chlorosis, and basically it means that the leaves are lacking chlorophyll, which is responsible for the green color of plant foliage. So that's step one. Don't panic if you see a few yellow leaves here and there in your garden. It's really a normal phenomenon, but it usually does mean that there is some form of stress going on. So let's talk about 6 different reasons for yellow pepper leaves, starting with the most common, the most likely reason that your plants are turning yellow, and ending with some that are a bit less common. So the first reason you might be seeing yellowing leaves on your pepper plants, and the most common by far, is some form of nutrient deficiency. The reason that both of these plants right here are showing yellowing leaves is in fact a nitrogen deficiency, the most common nutrient deficiency of all. Now you'll notice both of these pepper plants are growing in containers, and it's much more common to see yellowing leaves in your container plants simply because the nutrients are finite in the container in which they're being grown. So over time, you'll need to fertilize your pepper plants that are growing in pots regularly and try to time it so that you're getting ahead of a nutrient deficiency. In other words, ideally you won't see yellowing leaves. You'll have added the nutrients the plant requires before the plants are running low. And for any plants you're growing in ground, I'd highly recommend getting a soil test, which can tell you exactly which nutrients are deficient in your soil so that you're not adding anything that the plants don't need. Now we have a great video over on our other YouTube channel, Geeky Greenhouse, all about nutrient deficiencies, how to identify what type of nutrient is deficient in your plants just by looking at the leaves. For example, you can identify a nitrogen deficiency based on where the yellowing is. The lower leaves will begin turning yellow before the top leaves, and that yellowing will progress upwards over time because nitrogen is a mobile nutrient. However, not all deficiencies behave this way, so it's really best to understand the differences between each nutrient. I'll link to that video down below if you want to investigate further. Another reason you might see yellow leaves on your pepper plants is leaf scorch. This is very common early on, and I sort of harp on about this issue on this channel. When you have plants that have only been growing indoors for a few weeks and you bring them out into the direct sun, those tender leaves that were grown indoors are very vulnerable to the sun, and a really intense, hot, sunny day can burn the leaves. In this case, the leaves are more likely to have a sort of white appearance than yellow, but often around the edges of the burning, you'll see some yellowing as well. In extreme cases, this basically causes the leaves to burn up, become crispy and dried, and eventually die and fall off of the plant. The solution for leaf scorch is to prevent it altogether by hardening off your plants properly and bringing them outdoors gradually over the course of a couple of weeks to allow the foliage and new leaves to toughen up as they get used to the outdoors. Another common reason for yellowing leaves on peppers is pest damage. Aphids, thrips, different types of beetles, caterpillars, slugs. There are many different things that will like to feed on your pepper plants, and the resulting damage from these pests can come along with some yellowing. If you're noticing holes or little spots on your pepper plants and it doesn't seem like a disease, you might want to take a closer look and look under the leaves, on the flowers, near the newer foliage to see if there's anything hiding that may be feeding on your plants. The solution varies from one pest to another, but in general, it's best to invite beneficial insects that will help take care of those pests in your garden by planting flowers and other good companion plants nearby your peppers. And if you happen to be dealing with aphids, we do have a dedicated video on this channel just because they're so common. I'll leave a link to that video down below. Another common reason for yellowing pepper leaves, and I think this one is very overlooked, is just simple natural leaf death. As leaves age on the plant, if they're not actually helping the plant to grow any longer, your pepper plant may simply terminate that leaf, similar to how deciduous tree leaves will fall off in the fall when it starts to get colder. Pepper plants will do the same if a leaf is deemed to be not necessary. So usually this will happen down low on the plant, or if you have a plant that's especially bushy and dense with foliage, the leaves that are on the inside of that canopy, which aren't getting as much sunlight and therefore aren't producing as much energy for the plant, may begin to turn yellow and fall off of the plant. This is completely normal. All of our pepper plants do this, usually later in the season, and the longer your growing season is, the longer your plants have to age, and the more likely it is that you'll see this natural leaf death. So the solution here is nothing. You don't have to worry about it at all. Just recognize it when you see it. Don't worry about it so much. I also wouldn't even bother pulling leaves off when they turn yellow because the plant may still be taking mobile nutrients out of those leaves and putting them to use elsewhere in the plant. Another reason for yellowing pepper leaves is a pretty common one in our area because we have cold winters, and that is colder temperatures. This type of yellowing is most common, of course, in the shoulder seasons, in spring and in fall, when you have those overnight temperatures dipping down into the 50s Fahrenheit or below. That's most commonly when you'll see this, and if it gets much colder than that, the yellowing will intensify. Now, you can usually identify if the yellowing is caused by cold stress based on where the yellowing is occurring. Usually the yellowing will be totally randomized throughout the plant. You'll see some near the top of the plant, near the bottom, and everywhere in between, sort of scattered throughout your plant's foliage. Again, this is sort of a natural type of yellowing. The plant is trying to conserve its resources and prevent damage to the plant by bringing those resources in and reducing the number of leaves on the plant. While it is natural, this doesn't mean that it's a good thing. Peppers do not like cold temperatures at all. So if it's getting too cold, you can bring your potted plants indoors or into the garage, somewhere where it's a little bit warmer overnight, to try to extend your season and get some extra ripe peppers at the end of the year. Another reason for yellowing pepper leaves is poor drainage or overwatering. This is much less common on container plants because most containers have drainage holes. If they don't, of course, this can be a major problem. You don't want your containers filling up with water as it rains or as you irrigate them. You want that water to drain out. If you're planting directly in the ground, this is where you may run into some issues based on the composition of your soil. I highly suggest performing a simple soil test. You can do it yourself at home to figure out what the percentages are of sand, silt, and clay, the three main components of all natural soil. But if you notice pooling in your garden beds, the water just sits there in puddles and doesn't want to drain away, chances are you have a good amount of clay in your soil, which is a very common issue in certain parts of the world. There are several different things that you can do to try to improve the drainage of your soil. The first of which is adding compost and other organic material to your soil, which will help aerate the soil and allow it to drain a little bit more freely. And especially doing this over time will improve your soil and drainage. You can also try growing in raised beds, which naturally drain better, sort of like growing in containers. It's also important to only water when absolutely necessary. Rainfall, of course, is out of your control, but when you're bringing the garden hose out to water your pepper plants, make sure that it's actually necessary by checking the soil in advance. If you find any moisture a few inches down below the surface of the soil, don't bother watering. Unless your plants are showing clear signs of dehydration, there's no real need to water. In fact, I would suggest watering deeply but very infrequently for your pepper plants that are planted in the ground. That will encourage your plants to have a much deeper root system as well, and in the end those plants will have a much more resilient root system, capable of finding nutrients and water much deeper down. And as a last resort, if your garden is just swampy and you simply can't get it to drain, you can of course grow in containers, which naturally drain well. There are definitely drawbacks to growing in containers. You have to fertilize them more frequently, you have to water more frequently as well, but it can save you the headache of dealing with poor drainage in your in-ground beds. Yellowing leaves is not a death sentence. We're still expecting both of these plants to pull through and give us harvests of peppers. They just need a little bit of care and attention, and they'll be right back on track. Let me know if you have any additional questions down in the comments below, and thanks for watching Pepper Geek. It's very common for aphids